Well, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky is firing back at the U.S. and its NATO allies over concerns of a Russian invasion. He basically says, nah, it's not going to happen. Biden and, of course, everybody here in the U.S. is trying to bait Russia into a war, essentially, or at least cause some panic and give an excuse as to why the military industrial complex needs to pump out more weapons and prepare, and why our military budgets need to be so inflated, and also to probably boost Biden's poll numbers. Everybody seems to like a president who's at war. Biden seemed to have learned that lesson the hard way with Afghanistan when he pulled out of Afghanistan. Many of us were very upset at the way that the evacuation happened, or lack of evacuation, just kind of disappearing in the middle of the night and then leaving people behind and then saying, whoops, okay, I guess we have to go back and do something about that. I thought that was an absolute bungled mess. But that being said, I am one who absolutely wanted to end that war. Many people wanted to end that war. Many of us were just very frustrated with how the ending happened. But there were others that were mad about the ending in general, right? I mean, you had the mainstream media that was very much like, oh no, what are we going to do with all of these? What are the Afghan people going to do? And they're left with the Taliban. And oh no, this is a tragedy for the women and girls. And it is a tragedy for the women and girls. But that being said, we couldn't stick around forever and ever and ever, and we needed to end that war. But that didn't do Biden any favors. So he's looking at that. He's looking at the rest of his bungled presidency, and he's thinking, maybe, just maybe, if I'm a wartime president, I can boost my poll numbers. So we've been seeing all of this in the news, right? That Russia is amassing at the border of Ukraine, that Russia is going to invade. There's even some reports of Russia. I've seen this. The Economist actually put out this on Twitter, showing all the ways Russia could fully invade and take over Ukraine, as if Russia wants the responsibility of Ukraine. They don't. But they're making it sound like there's going to be a full-scale invasion. And that is not at all, by any means, what is happening. And even the president of Ukraine is saying, come on, knock it off. That is not what is happening. CNN reported this after a phone call between Biden and Zelensky. They reported the phone call didn't go so well. Their reports were that Zelensky was saying, come on, the rhetoric is too much. And Biden was saying, no, Russia's about to invade any minute now. And Zelensky saying, we don't agree. And Russia says, we're not going to invade. And so it's just the United States that's sort of coming out there and saying, oh, this is absolutely happening. So CNN came out with this report. The White House then refutes the report, saying, no, the phone call went fine. That's not what happened at all. So, but, we could see with our own eyes what's happening. And what we're seeing is that the Biden administration is absolutely ramping up rhetoric that there is going to be a full-scale Russian invasion into Ukraine any minute now, that they're going to go in and take Kyiv. I mean, it's crazy to think that that's even on Russia's mind. They've been building up this idea and this narrative that Russia is looking to expand, that Putin has, he's got aspirations of USSR glory on his brain. And that is, there's no real evidence that that's the case. What Russia is doing is trying to secure its national security, quite frankly. So they took Crimea as a matter of national security. They needed that region for the ports. They're not wanting to take this area of Ukraine that is under question, the area of Ukraine that would potentially Russia would come in and annex, possibly. I don't think Russia really wants to do it. But the area is the Donbas. It's a very small area on the eastern border of Ukraine and Russia. That area has been held by pro-Russian separatists since 2014. Ukraine doesn't have control over that area at the moment. That is being held by these pro-Russian separatists. They're wanting their own little country. Russia has supported that idea because they don't want NATO on their borders. They prefer NATO be on the Donbass's borders. And then that would be the buffer between NATO and Russia. However, this region is under constant attack by Ukraine. They're not strong. They're obviously a small rebel-controlled area. And they do subsist on Russian support. The people are not eligible for Ukraine passports because, they're in this kind of rebel-controlled region. And so they actually apply and receive Russian passports. Russia helps them with food and humanitarian aid. And there are reports that Russia also provides them with weapons, which I wouldn't doubt Russia does that for sure. I'm sure that they probably do. But that is the region that's in question. It's not like Russia's intending on going all throughout the entirety of Ukraine and they're going to invade the entirety of Ukraine. No, they're talking very specifically about this rebel-controlled area that now the leader of this area is claiming that he has it on good reports that Ukraine is planning on an invasion into their rebel-controlled area, and they're going to be planning a full-scale attack in the coming days. I'm not sure how accurate that is either. I don't think Zelensky has any desire to bait Russia into a war. Now, I wouldn't put it past NATO and the United States to come up with these plans of, for the Ukrainian military, telling them what you're going to do is you're going to do a full-scale attack in this region, and that will then cause Russia to potentially come in after Ukraine has come in. Now, they get to paint that as a Russian invasion without mentioning the fact that the Ukraine military went in first, because technically the area is Ukraine. So it wouldn't be a Ukrainian invasion into Ukraine, right? It would be the Ukraine forces in Ukraine and Russia invading in. They won't tell you the full story, and that full story is the Ukraine military goes into this rebel-controlled area that's been under rebel control for 8 years now, and Russia comes in to help the rebels defend the area. That would be what actually happens if that happens. But again, I don't think Zelensky wants to bait Russia into a war. I don't think he has any desire for that. NATO, the United States, that's a different story. I'm sure they've crafted up these plans. They probably slid them over to the Ukraine military. And now the Ukraine military is waiting for Zelensky to give them a green light on whether or not they're supposed to go forward with this. I'm sure they don't want to either. They probably don't want to have a battle with Russia either. So that is kind of what's really going on with Ukraine. They're in a holding pattern. What Russia wants is assurances that NATO is not ever going to expand in Ukraine. That is something that Russia has been asking over and over. Since the 90s, there has been some threats with U.S. Clinton really wanted to expand NATO, and that threat was something that Russia has had their eye on for a long time, and saying, no, you promised that you weren't going to expand NATO into the Warsaw Pact, and yet here you guys are discussing it. And we've since expanded more, further and further east, and that has upset Russia. We've ignored them. We haven't cared. We've done it numerous times now, not annexing, but bringing into the fold other NATO countries. And they've had it. And so, of course, they need to secure their borders for national security reasons. And that is why they're supporting this rebel-controlled area, which is the buffer between Ukraine and themselves. So it's a really bad situation for everybody. Russia is trying to stop NATO. How can they stop NATO? The United States has ignored them. Their only option is to continue supporting these rebels, but supporting the rebels causes NATO, gives them the reason to want to bring Ukraine into NATO. And, so it's this sort of stalemate, losing situation, which is why it's been this same way for 8 years. Nothing has really changed in 8 years. But suddenly now Biden is saying, oh no, it's worse now. Russia has absolutely amassed more troops on its border in its own country. But that is because Russia is genuinely afraid that Ukraine is going to be brought into NATO. And Russia wants this area controlled by rebels and not by Ukraine, because they don't want to see NATO bases right up on Russian borders. Fair enough, I suppose. So, they're just trying to sound the alarm. The Biden administration is, I think, for boosting Biden's poll numbers, make it look like he's doing something presidential, anything. And we all know war is the one thing that everyone can get behind. We know that Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, everybody's going to be saying he's so presidential and so wonderful if he has to go and defend Ukraine. So, and there's a lot of problems with defending Ukraine. There's a lot of problems with, look, it's a fledgling country. They're just trying to get themselves going. I'm all about them being absolutely their own nation and needing some help and some support. But some areas of Ukraine don't want to be part of Ukraine. And you have to remember that these borders are often just drawn arbitrarily. And, why this region wasn't desired by Russia to begin with, that's a question to ask. Why it was gifted to Ukraine, or why it was drawn into the map of Ukraine. These are questions to ask. but that clearly it was a region that Russia didn't really want originally. And now they're wanting to keep that area separate in order to have a buffer zone between them and NATO. So we'll see what happens here. But people in Ukraine, the Ukrainian government, they're pretty horrified by Biden and his remarks and his ramped up rhetoric. The sanctions against Russia are just going to debilitate the people. This is going to harm the Russian people. This is going to make them poorer. There's no reason to do it. It's bullying. It doesn't help, and it's purposeless. I mean, the only thing that this serves, I guess, is to help Biden boost his poll numbers. So that is the latest with what is going on with Ukraine, is that they are accusing the United States, Ukraine and Russia both, who are the ones, the two countries in question, they are accusing the United States of just ramping up rhetoric unnecessarily. So that's what you really need to know. And I did a radar on this on Hills Rising, and, this is kind of exactly what I was talking about. So I'll keep you posted with the latest, of course, of what's going on with Ukraine and Russia and the ramped up tensions and the ramped up rhetoric that the Biden administration is dishing out. So I will keep you posted. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to support this channel by liking, sharing, subscribing. Also, you can support the channel by becoming a member of my locals community, where you will get access to behind the scenes stuff. Also, some glimpses. I do, personal life postings, and also live streams, real casual live streams there, where we talk about all kinds of subjects that are not censored. And also we'll be launching some happy hours, some Zoom happy hours, and you can join me by joining my locals community. That link is down below. Thanks so much for watching.